When talking about trades, something that people should always remember is that the NFL isn't a video game. Sure, every player has actual ratings for their stats in a video game, albeit one that's basically a walking joke at this point, but there isn't a computer on this planet that can capture the personality and the ego of a professional athlete. On that note, let me introduce you to Stefon Diggs, one of the best wide receivers of his generation. Let's watch him go on the roller coaster from number one wide receiver to scraping the starting rotation, shall we? Hello everybody, I'm Alex, and today we'll be covering the Stefon Diggs trade tree. A trade tree is a visual representation of how a singular transaction has evolved over time, kind of like a family tree but in reverse. Instead of showing a human's ancestors, it shows a trade's descendants. If you don't know, the National Football League allows teams to swap assets, which includes players and draft rights. This was implemented to help the front office strengthen the organization for either the present or the future. In this trade tree, we'll learn how good organizations properly manage players while acknowledging their personality defects. Or in other words, for Diggs specifically, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Even though it is sometimes. Look, it's complicated, we'll get into it later. But before we get on to the future parts of this trade tree, let's talk about the past and what Diggs was like during the 2015 NFL Draft. Wide receiver Stefon Diggs grew up in Montgomery County, in Maryland, going to Our Lady of Good Counsel High School. Say that 5 times fast. Yes, that's the actual name. The school looks fantastic, frankly, compared to where I went to growing up. And more importantly, Diggs was a 5-star recruit out of high school. He got a few offers from Ohio State and a few other big-name universities, but elected to stay closer to home and went to Maryland. That's when things went wrong. Here is something that's kind of hard for people to comprehend. You need to throw the ball in order to catch it. That means you have to have throwers and catchers. Diggs was a catcher, and his thrower situation wasn't that great. In his freshman year, his healthiest year, his starting quarterback tore his ACL, which sucks. But that's why backups are a thing. You're here to make sure your season isn't absolutely dead after your starter goes down. Huh? Oh, he got injured too. And then the third stringer got injured in the same game. And then the fourth stringer got injured the week after. So that's how Stefon Diggs had to deal with a converted linebacker throwing passes to him. The lack of great QB play limited his production. His notable injuries limited the total games he played, and the locker room questions didn't help his draft stock either. This led to him falling to the 5th round, where he'd eventually be taken by a pick belonging to the Atlanta Falcons. But I thought Diggs was a Minnesota Viking first. And you're right. The pick was traded from the Falcons to the Vikings. And we're talking about this because there's a pretty good player for the Falcons involved in this. During the 2015 NFL Draft, the Falcons traded a 5th round pick and the 6th round pick to trade up to Minnesota's 5th round pick. Using that higher 5th, the Atlanta Falcons would select defensive tackle Grady Jarrett. You see that red? That signifies that this is a notable player, and Grady Jarrett is definitely that. He's made 2 Pro Bowls, and in one of those years he got a second-team All-Pro nod, which lines up with the year he had the most sacks, 7.5. That doesn't sound great, but remember, he's a defensive tackle, and 7 sacks is probably a decent season for an edge rusher anyway. He's doing this from the inside, where he's responsible for stuffing the run as well. His production dipped in the last few years, which has caused him to leave in free agency to sign with Chicago, but for a decade, he was a stalwart member of that Falcons D-line. And I know that Falcons fans are going to hate me for mentioning Super Bowl 51, but Jarrett went off that game. He had 3 sacks. He was part of the reason why the Patriots offense couldn't do anything for the first 3 quarters. And, well, we all know how that story ends, but hey, biggest game, he made the biggest contributions. Anyway, Jarrett, like I said earlier, Jarrett left in free agency to go to the Chicago Bears. Moving on to the Vikings. There's only one player to talk about here, even though there's 2 picks. The 6th rounder was used to select tackle Tyrus Thompson. He hasn't played a snap of NFL football. So now that he's out of the way, hey Stefon, in his rookie year, Diggs didn't play the first 3 games due to the typical slights that a 5th round rookie had to endure. However, after injuries to Charles Johnson and Jarius Wright, Diggs took the field. He proceeded to rack up 419 yards throughout his first 4 career games, which is 3rd most in NFL history, 2nd at the time, trailing only Anquan Bolden and the new record holder, Puka Nacua. His production was only slowed by the return of the above-mentioned wide receivers, and he ended his year with about 800 yards, which meant that he had 9 games and only got 400 yards out of it, which was a huge contrast with his burning hot first 4 games of his career. Still, he made the league's all-rookie team, but he didn't even finish as a finalist for Offensive Rookie of the Year, which is weird until you realize that that was the year Todd Gurley and Amari Cooper were rookies. Sucks to suck. Eventually partnered with undrafted phenom Adam Thielen to wreak havoc on the rest of the NFL, with the only saving grace being that Minnesota still really didn't have a quarterback. However, in 2017, those quarterback options were enough. Emphasis on the plural, there was a bunch of injuries. And they were enough to get them to the divisional round, where they would face the New Orleans Saints. The game was pretty in hand for the Vikings until the final 5 minutes, where the Saints would come storming back, the Inquisition by their side, leading to a field goal to take the lead with less than a minute left and no timeouts for the Vikings. Quarterback Case Keenum would take the snap, drop back, and heave a prayer to Diggs. Diggs leapt in the air, caught it, and was about to get absolutely destroyed by the defender leveling his shoulder at him. Well, that was what would happen if the defender didn't miss. Instead, Marcus Williams took out the only other defender even near Diggs, and he strolled into the end zone for a walk-off game-winning touchdown. Damn the Minneapolis Miracles win. Sure, the Vikes got blasted into the core of the earth by the Eagles the next game, but in my opinion, the Philly special had nothing on that crazy corner route reception by the Vikes. Now, to upgrade their offense, the Vikings signed quarterback Kirk Cousins to play with Diggs. It didn't go as well as they hoped it would. Not to say it went badly, far from it. Cousins helped the offense take the next step and got Diggs his first 1,000-yard receiving season of his career. But at that point, the defense had regressed a little bit, and thanks to an offensive line made of those swinging doors you see in old Western movies, the Vikings missed the playoffs that year, and the year after that, they were eliminated. At that point, an annoyed Diggs decided he was done in the Twin Cities and asked to be traded. Diggs, in his Vikings tenure, had amassed 4,500 yards in his 5 years with the team, despite having, at best, above-average quarterback play. Sorry, Case Keenum. Sorry, Teddy Bridgewater. Sorry, Sam Bradford. And sorry, Kirk Cousins. But you aren't Tom Brady. However, there are a few other factors that made trading a receiver of Diggs' caliber more palatable for the Vikings. Something that I mentioned offhandedly in the draft section earlier was that GMs were worried about Diggs' character. And on this note, I cannot in good faith continue this video without bringing up the infamous video of Vikings defensive end Brian Robinson asking his teammates who they would least want to date their sister.
What guy on this team would you least like to date your sister?
Oh, Stefon Diggs.
My favorite reaction is Dalvin Cook just like thinking like, oh, who the hell could it be? And then realizing, oh, what, right, Diggs.
What the? Diggs.
Another thing to note is that Diggs expressed frustration with not being the clear and away #1 wide receiver in the Vikings room, thanks to the amazing abilities of Adam Thielen, of course. Despite them playing wildly different roles on offense, Diggs still wasn't comfortable in Minnesota. He also made a couple cryptic tweets that seemed to blame Kirk Cousins for things. I'm still not sure what. He's publicly refuted those statements. I don't know. The Vikings of that era were also leaning hard on running back Dalvin Cook. And while Thielen was willing to play ball with the new run-first offense, Diggs was less than pleased. I would keep this in mind if I were you. He skipped the practice, got fined for it, and then made his trade request to Vikings GM Rick Spielman. In the offseason of 2020, ladies and gents, we have a trade to announce. The Minnesota Vikings traded Stefon Diggs along with the 7th in the 2020 NFL Draft to the Buffalo Bills in exchange for the 20th overall pick, a 5th round pick, a 6th round pick, and a 4th round pick, the latter coming in 2021. The other picks mentioned would all be 2022 draft picks. All of them. So now, let's start with what Buffalo got. Okay, at this time, I kind of laughed at the trade for the Bills. I think a lot of people, including me, assumed that Diggs wanted out because Kirk Cousins wasn't that accurate downfield. And he had been traded to the franchise with a quarterback who had an easier time throwing it into the stands and hitting an open wide receiver. Real Bills fans remember the days when Josh Allen dropped back the pass and immediately took heart pills because they had no clue what was about to happen next. Well, Josh Allen sure cleaned up his act real quick, and Diggs went supernova in his first year with Buffalo. Wait, hold up. Didn't Buffalo acquire Allen in a trade? I could make a trade tree on that. Let me know if you want to see that retrospective in the comments below. And while you're at it, why don't you hit like, subscribe, and let me know about other trade trees you might want to see me make. But back on topic. Where was I? Right, Diggs going off Bills. Despite incredible production as a Viking, Diggs has never made it to a Pro Bowl for his entire tenure in the Twin Cities. His first year in Buffalo saw him not just make the Pro Bowl, but also get first team All-Pro honors. He led the league in receptions with 127 and total yards with 1,535. He would make 3 more consecutive Pro Bowls and picked up a second team All-Pro as well, seeing increased production from his Viking days until 2023. During those 4 years, he became far and away the Bills' best receiver, exactly what he wanted, while also helping Buffalo quarterback Josh Allen reach his full potential as a thrower, and becoming a true star of the league in the process. It wouldn't last. We'll talk about that in a bit, but for now, let's look at the 7th round pick that the Bills got from the Vikings. The 7th round pick, number 239, would see Buffalo select cornerback Dane Jackson. He was a consistent depth piece for the Bills, with snaps on special teams, except for 2022. That year, he was a starter, and the Bills had a top 2 defense in points allowed that year, although they did fall to the rank of 6th in terms of yards allowed. That's still fantastic, though, and getting a starter on an elite defense in the 7th, who played consistent snaps throughout his entire career, is a great pick by the Bills front office. He walked in free agency, ending this part of the trade tree, although he has returned to Buffalo as of the making of this video. So now that we're done talking about how the Bills won their part of the trade tree, they got everything they want out of this, we talk about the Vikings now. For starter, okay, let's start with, let's see, the 1st round pick. The 1st round pick looks very juicy. Did the Vikings get anybody good with him? Oh. That's pretty good. Justin Jefferson is to a wide receiver what a Ferrari is to a Toyota Corolla. Hey, remember how Diggs got 2 All-Pro nods and made 4 Pro Bowls? Jefferson played 4 full seasons of NFL football and has already matched the Pro Bowl nods and surpassed the number of All-Pro totals. His rookie campaign ironically started him like Diggs, on the bench, this time until week 3, where he got 7 passes for 175 yards and a touchdown. If Coach Mike Zimmer had tried to bench him after that, I think that Kirk Cousins would have gotten his show out to dig a grave. 2020 saw him finish 2nd in Offensive Rookie of the Year voting, thanks to an incredible effort by Chargers quarterback Justin Herbert. But he still made the Pro Bowl and nabbed the 2nd team All-Pro nod, reaching 1,000 yards despite missing 3 games and not starting one of them. His sophomore campaign led to the same accolades, minus the Rookie of the Year for obvious reasons. And then 2022 hit. 1,800 yards, which led the league, 128 receptions, which led the league, a Pro Bowl nod, a first team All-Pro nod, the Offensive Player of the Year award, and hell, he got MVP votes, which never happens. He's a wide receiver. He got injured a little over halfway through the season after that. Sucks, but what can you do? It's the NFL. It's going to happen. He bounced back though. 2024 saw him make both the Pro Bowl and first team All-Pro again, and he even got votes for Offensive Player of the Year. So to summarize, the Vikings traded a disgruntled, very good wide receiver for someone who could be the greatest wide receiver in franchise history. A franchise that had Randy Moss playing through him for most of his prime. Good job, Vikes. Now, for the other picks. The 5th round pick was traded for a 4th rounder in next year's draft, sent to the Bears. With the 5th rounder, the Bears would select Trevis Gibson, who was an edge rusher who was non-existent in his first year and then pretty good in his second. He had 7 sacks. That's really good. However, he regressed in his 3rd year, getting only 3 sacks with more starts and was then waived by the Bears as a result, which ends this part of the trade tree. Although I have to note, the Bears had swapped coaching staffs between Gibson's good sophomore year and his below average third year, so asking me, I think Matt Eberflus and his staff ruined him, which would be on brand for Matt Eberflus. The Vikings then used the 2021 fourth from the Bears to select Cameron Bynum. Fantastic pick. Bynum was a safety out of California, the college and the state in this case, who didn't make any all-rookie teams or Pro Bowls, but what he did do was start for the Vikings in their secondary for the entirety of his time with his incumbent team. Look, something that gets lost in the 18-game bone grinder of a regular season is that you really only need 22 players to play a game. The problem comes from injuries and sometimes matchups, but for secondary players, it's basically injuries. Bynum has played every game of his career, save 3 for his rookie season. He's a starter on the NFL defense, holding down that spot for nearly half a decade. You got that with a fourth. That's great value. The best ability is availability, and the Vikings got that from Cameron Bynum. Solid starting value, which landed him a nice contract with the Indianapolis Colts, and ends this branch of the trade tree. Okay, so moving on. Next up, the 2020 6th round pick. The 6th was traded with a 7th round pick from the same draft to the Baltimore Ravens for a 7th in 2020 and a 5th in next year's draft. Starting with Baltimore. With the 6th rounder, Baltimore took wide receiver James Proche. He did nothing for them. He had 200 yards as a career high and played 14 games total for the Ravens. He wasn't great, waived from the Ravens. Moving on. The 7th rounder that the Ravens got was used to take safety Geno Stone. He didn't do much and was an on and off starter for the team for his last 2 years in Baltimore, and he walked in free agency. But I have to note he did start a full season for the team he left for in free agency. The 2024 Bengals. You know, the team said defense was in the bottom third of both the yards and points. But the Vikings didn't do anything in this trade either. The Vikings took Kenny Wilkes and Zach Davidson with their picks. The first guy was a member of the front seven, the latter a tight end. Together, they played a grand total of 8 games in the NFL. Wowee. And that leads us to the 2021 4th round pick that the Vikings got from the Bills in the Diggs trade. With that pick, they took Janarius Robinson, a defensive end from Florida State who literally didn't play a single snap with the Vikings. He got signed off the practice squad with the Eagles, ending this branch of the trade tree, and he bounced around the NFL until he got to Vegas, where he got his first taste of NFL action a few years after his career started. He's still in the league at least, but This ends the Buffalo-Minnesota Diggs trade tree branch. And I'm adding all these modifiers because the tree itself isn't done yet. You see, remember how I mentioned earlier that Diggs didn't like the fact that the offense was getting run heavy in Minnesota? Well, after firing offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey for an ineffective offense that had a crazy EPA, yet couldn't score points to save their lives, the Bills turned to Joe Brady to help them fix their offense. And he did, via the running game. Does this sound familiar to you? Like in Minnesota, Diggs was not happy with his lower usage, despite still putting up numbers that would easily beat any of his Minnesota years, albeit this was adjusted for inflation in the pass-happy league, so take that what you will. The lack of targets and the idea of Diggs becoming an expiring contract led to him being traded in the 2024 offseason. The deal is as follows. Stefon Diggs would be packaged of the 6th round pick in 2024 and a 5th in 2025, and sent to the Houston Texans in exchange for a 2025 second. If Diggs' plan was to walk into Houston as the best receiver in the room, well, buddy, I've got news for you. I'm a Titans fan, so I don't like the Texans at all, but I have eyes when I'm wearing my glasses. And I know that their current starting wide receivers, Tank Dell and Nico Collins, are pretty good at football. So predictably, Diggs' production fell off a cliff. This was also due to the Texans' O-line betting the over on sacks that CJ Stroud was going to take that year, because that was the only explanation on why a decent offensive line completely fell apart last season. Diggs had the worst season of his career in 2024, mostly due to injury, but rate-wise, it still wasn't looking great. He only had 494 yards throughout 8 games. Projecting that throughout a full season, that's probably barely beating his Buffalo totals. To make things worse, that injury made him an unattractive prospect for a lot of teams in free agency. He inked a deal with New England for a little over $21 million per year. That's a lot, but not even close to top of the market wide receiver money. He's barely squeaking into the top 20, and I'm guessing he probably could have made top 10 money if he stayed in Buffalo. The moral of the story? Be careful what you wish for. But we still have a bit more to get through. Don't worry, the upcoming players aren't much to talk about, if only because they haven't done anything yet. These are all 2025 draft picks. I'm just going to name them and their positions. The 6th round pick that Houston would acquire was traded to Detroit for another 6th and 7th the same year. With that 6th, the Detroit would select defensive tackle Mekhi Wingo. He's currently the depth piece of this D-line and didn't start a single game. The 6th that Houston got became Jawar Jordan, a running back out of Louisville who literally hasn't done anything yet. The 7th isn't much better. The Houston took Ladarius Henderson, an offensive lineman who hasn't played it down in NFL football. And reminder, these are all 2024 picks. Although, speaking of offensive linemen, I'm surprised that the Texans didn't try giving Henderson a shot. Like, was he really that bad? Because the line you fielded was just as terrible. This ends this branch of the trade tree, meaning that the only living parts left are the 2025 5th round pick that Houston got and the 2025 2nd round pick Buffalo got. The second sent from Houston to Buffalo in return for Diggs would be packaged with another 2nd and a 4th. So Buffalo could trade up to Chicago's higher 2nd while also getting a 3rd and a 7th. In order of assets named, these players would become tackle Ozzie Trapilo, defensive tackle Shamar Turner, defensive tackle TJ Sanders, edge rusher Landon Jackson, and wide receiver Caden Prather, the first 2 being taken by Chicago, and the latter 3 taken by the Bears. We skipped the 4th round pick that Chicago got from Buffalo because that pick was traded. It was sent back to Buffalo in exchange for another 4th and a 5th. The pick that Buffalo would get back would become Deion Walker, another defensive tackle out of Kentucky. The Bears would use the 4th to select Ruben Hippolyte, a linebacker out of Maryland, and the 5th was be used to select Za Frazier, a cornerback out of Texas San Antonio? That's a real college? I can't even find it online because Texas San Antonio College returns with colleges in San Antonio, Texas. Well, cool, I guess. Finally, we have the last asset. The 2025 5th rounder package with Diggs was traded by Houston with a 5th in 2027 in exchange for 2 6ths and a 7th. 7th would be used to say tight end Luke Lackey. That name sounds like a lazy cartoon villain's henchman. Luke Lackey, okay. Both 6th, the 6th. The 6th were both traded. The higher one, pick 179, was packaged with a 3rd into the 2026 draft and sent to the Miami Dolphins for a 4th and a 7th. Those picks would become running back Woody Marks and defensive lineman Keontae Hamilton. The 6th would become running back Ollie Gordon. None of these assets have been moved as of yet, meaning we move on to the other 6th. Pick 224. This was packaged with the 7th so the Texans could trade up in the 6th round to take quarterback Graham Mertz. The Denver Broncos, who had the higher pick, acquired punter Jeremy Crawshaw with the 6th and tight end Caleb Lawner with the 7th. This ends this branch of the trade tree, but we still aren't done because the Browns traded the 2025 5th that led to all this late round madness. Pick was packaged with the 2025 6th rounder and sent to Seattle for the higher 5th. Pick 144. Seattle would take wide receiver Torrey Horton and guard Brian Cabledew. And the Browns? Well, if pick 144 sounds familiar, that's because that's not a mistake. With the 144th pick in the 2025 NFL entry draft, the Cleveland Browns select quarterback Shedeur Sanders. I am not making this up. There's probably a joke about egos and carriers I can make, but I don't want to level accusations at a guy who's barely older than me and is just starting his career in the NFL. So for now, I think that's it, which means this trade tree is done. It's still alive, but it's done for now. Did you enjoy this video? If you did enjoy it, please subscribe to this channel. If we somehow get to 100,000 subscribers, which is never going to happen hopefully, I'll make the Patrick Mahomes trade tree, which that trade tree was supposed to be this trade tree, and I got halfway through before realizing that there was no way I was going to finish this in time for my self-imposed deadline. So yeah, Patrick Mahomes trade tree, crazy. And actually, a part of that trade tree made its way into this one. If you don't want to subscribe, just leave a like. It doesn't take that much time and it supports me. But if you do have the time and still don't want to subscribe, why don't you leave a comment to tell me what trade trees I should make? I'm willing to do NFL, NBA, or NHL ones. Sorry, baseball. And be sure to leave the ID in the comments below so I can see it. I'm Alex. I thank you for spending your time with me, and I don't have a proper outro. Oh, I know. Do you Extra Throttle House, where they just randomly cut you off at the end of the